Think global trade is fair? Think again. Trump's latest tariffs are hitting the poorest countries far harder than their wealthier counterparts, and the consequences could be devastating. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and EU members face tariffs around 10 to 15%. But Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and other third-world countries? They're staring at tariffs ranging from 37 to 49%, some even as high as 50%. So why is this happening? Well, it's all about who's got leverage. Historically, the generalized system of preferences offered duty-free access to more than 100 developing nations, a major part of U.S. policy. The U.S. GSP program, however, expired in December 2020 and has not been renewed, removing critical trade preferences for developing countries. Cambodia, the garment powerhouse of Asia, has its exports slapped with 49% tariffs. Bangladesh is seeing 37%, Laos 48%, and Myanmar an astonishing 45%. Brazil and India are facing a 50% tariff rate. The average Cambodian earns about $6.65 a day, less than one-fifth the global daily average. Meanwhile, Cambodia has zeroed out its own tariffs on U.S. imports and even committed to buying Boeing planes, yet still couldn't avoid the steep U.S. duty. Just a month back, the U.S. slashed development aid to Africa, cutting funding for health, education, and food programs by up to 20%, and now insists on stricter tariff-heavy trade deals instead. Despite decades of support, African exports to the U.S. face new tariffs as high as 50%, squeezing their economy. This isn't just an economic tweak, it's a trade tsunami. More than 60 countries, rich and poor, are scrambling to respond to tariffs that range from 10 to over 40%. India now faces up to 50%, thanks to tensions over its Russian oil ties. The formula behind this is simple if brutal: divide a country's U.S. trade deficit by its exports, halve it, and impose that rate, with a minimum 10% floor. That means countries with tiny exports but large deficits get punished hardest. Madagascar is paying a 47% tariff, Lesotho 50%. Trade experts say this formula is arbitrary, narrow, mechanical, and wildly unfair. It cements inequality, targeting low-income nations that have relied on preferential access for growth. The consequences are compounding. In Cambodia, nearly 1 million garment workers face job losses. In Sri Lanka, debt restructuring is being derailed thanks to these trade shocks. UNCTAD warns these escalating tariffs could triple trade costs for the world's most vulnerable economies, erasing years of progress in poverty reduction and growth. The International Trade Center says global trade may shrink by 3 to 7%, with developing nations suffering the largest economic hits. This tactic is turning trade into power politics. Qatar and Saudi Arabia face only baseline tariffs, even though they're wealthy regional players. Poor nations of Africa and Southeast Asia? They're left bleeding. Economists describe this as unequal exchange. Value extracted from poor nations supports consumption and wealth in the rich world. Trump's tariffs are reinforcing that inequality. The World Trade Organization estimates merchandise trade volumes will shrink by 0.2% in 2025 due to such policy shifts, nearly 3 points below projections without these tariffs. Donald Trump's tariffs aren't just trade tools, they're weapons in a geopolitical fight. And in this war, it's the poorest nations that are paying the steepest price.